A stunner last night in Boston in game number 2 of the NBA playoffs in that opening round series out east between the Celtics and the Miami Heat. It does not matter, DRS, where Miami is, who's on the floor in a playoff run. They are going to give you your best shot each and every night. And the Heat did that in game number 2. Shorthanded, of course, Jimmy Butler not going to play more than likely in this opening round series, regardless of the duration against Boston. But everybody else showed out, especially from deep. A franchise record in a playoff game. 23 converted three-pointers last night for the Heat as they pull off the huge upset over the Celtics, 111-101. Miami closed as a 14.5-point favorite, or underdog, and they win outright by double digits behind those 23 made threes.
It's incredible. It's outrageous. It's so much fun to watch, and it just reminds us that, that football moniker, Ben, we talk about any given Sunday. It's really true in the NBA as well. You do have professionals on both sides, and also a lot of these guys, when they get hot, can stem the tide of a much better team. We looked at this game yesterday. The spread was so you can equate it to football. It was 2 touchdowns. 14.5 at the FanDuel Sportsbook yesterday. And also, shout out to the people, Ben. The Fade the Public poll, you know who the public was backing yesterday? The Miami Heat in the lead, getting 14.5 points, as both myself and Davis sort of scoffed at that. Like, yeah, of course. The public's going to see a lot of points. It's a playoff game. It's an NBA team. Got to back them. And they were exactly right yesterday. The only shame of it is instead of taking the points, you should have just taken the money line, and what a bonanza that would have been. But back to the game itself. The Miami Heat, 111 points. This isn't really how they want to win basketball games. You figure they got to go back to the 1990s with Pat Riley. Like, hey, we got to win games 88-86 because we just can't keep up. But shout out Spo by going, you know what? The only way we're winning this game is if we absolutely go Nuketown from 3-point range. Now, granted, you can say that, Ben, and shoot 43 threes and make 9 of them and get blown out, but they made 23 3-point shots, which included Tyler Hero dropping 6 of those here. If you would have told me before the game, we got to go nuclear from 3-point range. All right, watch this. Kevin Love's going to come off the bench and knock down 5 or 6. He didn't even make a 3-point shot or shoot a 3-point shot, and they still made 23 3-point shots as a team. Boy, I loved watching that game there. It's just a shame, again, getting back to the original point. Man, if Jimmy Butler could come back and be healthy, what a series we might have. But, as you said, still a heavy favorite here towards the Celtics.
Yeah, they are. And we'll look at the series price and the outlook moving forward. But when you pay forward what we saw in game number 2 from game number 1, same exact spread, 14.5 in favor of the Celtics. For a guy that was across the pond in London over the past week, I'm like, what is going on here? And then, of course, I made sure to know what Jimmy Butler's status was for game number 2 and this series. But Boston rolled Miami, and there seemed like there was going to be very little shot despite Heat culture in the postseason under Spo, regardless of what Miami looked like on the floor in this series, especially inside TD Garden, as the Celtics won by 20 in game number 1 and covered as that 14.5-point home favorite. Boston this year at home, part of the reason having home floor advantage we thought was so crucial for the C's, DRS, throughout this playoff run, Eastern Conference and perhaps the NBA Finals, is because they entered last night 41 regular season games, game number 1 against Miami, 38-4 straight up at home, booked as a favorite in all 42 games, and 23-17-2 against the number. They lose outright as a 14.5-point favorite against Miami. 23 made threes. Miami was 12 of 37 in game number 1 from deep. They were 23 of 43 last night in Boston. And Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum weren't all that bad, DRS. 28 out of Tatum, 33 for Jaylen Brown. They combined for 61 points, and yet Miami still wins by double digits.
You're right. Look at the box score there. 46% as a team from the floor. Not bad. 38% from 3-point range. That's actually very good. Okay from the free throw line at about 71%. But you're right. Just give me the box score and tell me. Jason Tatum had 28. Brown had 33. That's probably a blowout win where you would cover the minus 14.5 yesterday. The one error I could say was 30 minutes out of Porzingis, a minus 32, which included a 1 for 9 from the field and an 0 for 4 from 3-point range. Now, Porzingis have been playing quite well for the Celtics this year. and particularly down the stretch and had a nice game number one, but it didn't work out in his favor there. You look up and down that lineup for the Celtics, and you expect great things. Why? Because we do think they're the best team in the NBA overall, and there's no panic here that, oh my goodness, home court advantage is now for the Heat. Watch out, Boston Celtics. You would have to go nuclear in every game for the Miami Heat from three-point range to have a chance to take down the Celtics. We know that's not going to happen. You team that doesn't used to shoot tons of three-point shots, yeah, it works one night, but you know the adjustments are going to be made from the Boston Celtics as they go on the road, and we'll see what happens. But that's an unbelievable win for the Heat, and it's just one of those things we talk about, Heat culture and Eric Spoelstra. Just when you think they're down and out, the zombie Heat roster lineup sometimes that they put out in February, like, this team isn't even any starters in the lineup. Oh, look at that. They went on the road and won basketball games. This is what they're about, and I just love the fact that we're going to get more basketball, Ben. At least we get 5 games out of this series, and I can buy that.
And when you look at the roster last night, Jaime Jaquez, 3 threes. Nikola Jovic, 3 threes. Caleb Martin, who had a huge postseason run for Miami a year ago, 5 triples. Of course, Tyler Hero, the team's leading scorer, with 24 and 6 made threes. But Haywood Highsmith off the bench, 3 made threes. Duncan Robinson, who might be their best overall shooter, just 2 of 7. And they still are 23 of 43, a franchise record in terms of made threes in a playoff game last night. So the Celtics entered game number 2 as a 14.5-point home favorite and a minus 50,000 outright favorite to win this series. They're still heftily favored, minus 2,500, but the books are buying back in. So DRS, what do you make of the rest of this series? Can Miami push Boston to 6 or 7 games, or is that their one blimp on the radar, and from here on out, Boston is refocused and they roll Miami?
Sometimes you need this, Ben. And I know nobody likes to take losses. I get that. But if you're Joe Mazzulla, you say, okay, now I get in the locker room. You guys ready to listen? You guys ready not just to roll that basketball out? You want to watch a little bit extra film? You want to put this Miami Heat team away? I would watch out for game number 3 because I think you're going to get an unbelievable effort from the Boston Celtics. We're not knocking the Miami Heat. You know, they're the 8th seed for a reason and not as good as the Boston Celtics, and they're supposed to lose this series. But now I think the Boston Celtics get that beating on their home court and be like, you know what, guys? Let's not let this happen again. Watch out in game number 3.
The Celtics open as an 8-point road favorite in South Beach Saturday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I'll have one final point about the series odds because I think there's a few discrepancies that do favor Boston. Up next, live right here on the Early Line. A doubleheader of NBA playoff action on a Wednesday. We'll recap what we saw in Oklahoma City in just a moment. But both of the top seeds in either conference in action around the association last night. And, of course, Miami pulls off the stunner to even the series at 1 game apiece. But we still see the odds heavily skewed in favor of Boston, and rightfully so. But, Donnie, let's look at the odds again because the Celtics are a minus 2,500 outright favorite to win this series. For the series to go 5 games, that's the total games market, it's minus 130. If you went in the correct score market, Boston to win in 5, 4 games to 1, it's minus 125 currently on the FanDuel Sportsbook. But the Celtics on the series spread, as you saw, to cover a 2.5 game number is just minus 110. That would be Boston in 5 games. So the odds makers still expect the Celtics to win in 5. There's your best price. I'm going to bet it, although these commercial breaks are very short, in our next one.
Yeah, there you go. Might be able. Yeah, you don't want to make those mistakes, Ben, with these quick breaks and be like, okay, I just bet the minus 2,500 when I didn't mean to do that at that point. But you're right about that. If Boston is supposed to win this series easily here, they're probably going to handle their business at that minus 2.5 to get the much, much better price. But kudos to anybody out there who goes, no. I like Boston, but this is going 7. They're going to win it in 7. I'll lay the minus 2,500. Congratulations on that. But yes, not very smart betting if you're going to go that way. And you got a lot to lose, particularly if they lose the series. We don't think they're losing the series is the point here. But the better bet is to take a look at that 5 games and or the minus 2.5.
Listen, if that is your feel, that last night was a representation of what the Heat do in the playoffs and how they're going to test a Boston team that has left a lot to be desired over the past few years, then don't listen to what I said. I still believe in Boston getting this done rather quickly, despite the big hiccup last night in what Miami presents in playoff basketball. Now to the number 1 overall seed in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who despite being the top overall seed, a young core that prior to this past weekend had not played a true playoff game altogether. And it showed 43-43 at the break, down early in the third. They rallied there, of course, in the fourth quarter and held on at the very end, 94-92 over New Orleans. So OKC got that test and then they used it to have more proven experience, as we saw last night. The Oklahoma City Thunder win huge by more than 30, 124-92 at home to take a 2-0 series lead over New Orleans. The Thunder cover easily as a 7.5-point home favorite.
Yeah, take the fluke out of the equation for OKC. And I know it's still early in the series. They're up 0-2 or 2-0, and that's where you should be heading into your road opponent here, which is the Pelicans. But hear me out on this. Through the regular season, we're looking at Oklahoma. You know what? The pressure's going to build up in the playoffs. And I continually get back to game number 1. Love the fact that they won that in a close margin because you know as well as I do. You can say whatever you want, Ben. Look at the regular season. We're supposed to be the number 1 seed. You don't know until you prove in the playoffs. And the Thunder haven't been able to do that. Now, who knows, Ben, if they're going to go on a run to the Western Conference Finals or even win the Western Conference and head to the NBA Finals. But I love the fact that they're coming out against a team they're supposed to beat, win game number 1, then settle in and be like, you know what, guys? We're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be the top seed. We're supposed to win these games and absolutely hammer the Pelicans. I love the fact that you got that balanced scoring out of that starting 5. And by the way, shout out SGA, who can't score under 30 points, but certainly isn't allowed to cross the 35-point threshold. He always winds up in the low 30s here. Hits his number, which was 29.5 yesterday. Great win for OKC. Better things are on the horizon because I think they're settling into you know what? Yeah, we're supposed to be here, Ben.
And we saw some market movement from the odds, both in the spread and the total entering game number 2 last night. Oklahoma City, 9-point favorite for game 1. The Pels cover. New Orleans, the best underdog team in the NBA, but now 21-12-1 against the spread. Total for game 1 was 216.5. Stayed well under. Neither team got to 95 points. The total dropped by 5 points from game 1 to game 2 to 11 and a hook last night. And it goes over because Oklahoma City scored 124. But the Thunder have been one of the best cover teams around the NBA all year long, on display last night. Now, as a home favorite in OKC this year, the Thunder 24-13 against the spread. So Oklahoma City, minus 3,000. Minus 3,000 to win this series outright in advance of the Western Conference semifinals. How quickly do you think Oklahoma City does that?
I think this is actually going to be a 5-game series. I do, because I do think the Pelicans are talented. It's still road. And also, Ben, we talk about still learning for OKC. Road environment in the playoffs, facing adversity. They might drop one of those games, I do believe, to the Pelicans here. But when they get home in game number 5, if they do split, they'll be able to wrap up business. 5 games here is what this should go for round number 1.
I completely agree. Gentlemen sweep, but I would actually think 6 games may be more likely than a sweep outright for OKC.